Welcome to the Mystic-Skeptic radio show and podcast, the program in which we ask the tough questions and explore different alternatives to today's pressing issues, theories, or enigmas. Our show is devoted to the exploration of all things mystical, philosophical, scientific, political, conspiratorial, and cosmic. Join us in an exploration of the Mystic-Skeptic mind space. In this week's show, we have again our guest, Joe Bailog. And, we've tackled every single subject under the sun. Now we're going to reveal what has been on everybody's mind. And we're going to speak about the one subject that we cannot not speak about, and that's the coronavirus. But not only the coronavirus, but its origins and how it can affect your life and destroy our civilization. I pride myself for this show not being sensationalistic or trying to take advantage of a very serious topic such as coronavirus. But once I heard this, I have to talk about it with Joe, because us people who are trying to be critical thinkers, and we're trying to make sense of what's going on in the world, the one subject I haven't talked about so far is the Illuminati. Mr. Joe Bailog just shared, that's also a great revelation, that he was an Illuminati fan or someone very interested in the Illuminati in 7th grade. I'm sure you've come far from there, but there was one point that I was actually looking into Masonic lodges and how they influence politics and stuff like that. But tell me, in your research on the Illuminati back then, I guess it was in the 2000s, what did you find out, and what was the most compelling reason to believe in that kind of stuff?
The thing that I think got me started in looking at the Illuminati was wanting to understand how power works, because I guess there's multiple layers to this. In the one hand, this was that's kind of the deeper one. Let's just start at the top. I grew up Roman Catholic, so that starts you out from a perspective of power is situated in the hands of a few. And obviously, for those who know but don't know, but because I'm the spokesperson for Christian religion on the show, I'll elucidate the idea that in the Roman Catholic Church, the structure is set up such that at the top there's a person that has authority, and with that comes power, and this person is chosen by other people who are below him, who also have authority and power. But this hierarchy is multi-leveled, so it's a political hierarchy, in that the person at the top, the Pope, has the last say in a lot of decisions, sort of like the analogy is the president. And the people underneath him are the magisterium and the hierarchy of the church. They collectively, this lower class, the magisterium, are considered the college. I might be getting my terminology wrong, it's been a while, but the college of bishops and archbishops that work with each other in committees to make mutual decisions. They come together collectively every once in a great while. So that's why you have Vatican II as a collection of all the archbishops along with the Pope to make decisions on behalf of the entire church. So in that case, they're exercising their authority. So then you have the lower levels, right? So you have archbishops, bishops, priests, and laity. And you could argue that since Vatican II, laity and priests have had sort of the same amount of authority, but that's a whole nother contentious issue. The point is, the question is, who has authority and power, and how is it exercised? So growing up in the Roman Church, where that was instilled in me a sense of hierarchy, which I think is very positive, because hierarchy exists and is, I think, good and practical. That looking at the other dimension of life, not the religious dimension, but looking at the political dimension, how does hierarchy exist there? Because, and when I was in 7th grade, that was right at the time that the World Trade Centers fell. And watching those towers go down and watching those people die, didn't actually see people die, but watch people jump from windows, was so graphic and striking that it made me sit there and start asking a bunch of questions of how could this happen? You know, what happened that we got to this position? Because the United States is always considered this bulwark of power and authority that can't be infiltrated and no one can get to us. And then someone got to us, a handful of people. So that made me get into all these conspiracy theories about 9/11. And I just ate it up with a spoon, because the alternative narrative was basically, if people remember, that the then president of, well, the dictator president of Iraq had instigated a direct attack on the United States through a few, like, let's say rogue agents that he had chosen. And that was kind of the whole preface to going into war with Iraq, was that Saddam Hussein had instigated basically a geopolitical conflict, which later we only find out that that wasn't the case. But the lack of evidence to substantiate a claim like that was kind of abounding. It was just kind of snippets. It was propaganda on the news. Like, it was Saddam Hussein, it was Iraq, and it was for oil, and it's for, and all of these one-liners that I kept hearing over and over and over again made me go, there's got to be more to the story. And so I just did what every teenage kid did. I went on Facebook and I went on YouTube and I started looking around, and people were posting all these conspiracy theories. So that made me look at, well, the president, position of power and authority, and then connect that to how does government actually work. So if government works in the forefront, sort of transparently, and everyone's good and kosher, then that's wonderful, but it's maybe not the whole story. Because I also grew up watching Sculder and Mulder, The X-Files, because my sister liked The X-Files. And so that's got, aliens and all the thing. But when it comes to government and The X-Files, it's all about the shadow government and figuring out who they are. And it's ironic because two main characters work for the FBI. So that got me sort of into that and trying to make all these connections about who could possibly be behind this. And then the word Illuminati came up, and then it was like, well, Illuminati is great because it's got a few things going for it. One, it means light. Two, it means shadow government. It's connected to this idea of a system of government that exists behind what we see in the news and we know about. And then three, it's also Roman. So it's a Roman word, and it means light. So it's like, oh, it's great. It's got all these things for me. So what I learned about it was that Illuminati is a group of individuals who are at the highest levels of government across the world, that began somewhere around, some people say the 1700s, some people say 1500s, some people say earlier. It's connected to the Masons. The Freemason is a brotherhood organization, and then it's also connected to the system of belief that is the NWO, or the New World Order. So when you study Illuminati, you get into all these things about looking at dollar bills and $20 bills and looking at the eye in the pyramid and what that means, and connecting that to Egypt. And you can go down that rabbit hole. But as far as what I got into was, is there a government, a group of powerful people who have all the money who know what's actually going on, who are making all the decisions, that are in control of how the world and the government policies, procedures, how they actually work. Because the thing that's explaining what happened, what I just watched on 9/11, doesn't add up to me, and there's got to be something more behind it. Now there's deeper things when you go into it, as far as Illuminati is not in the Masons too. If you combine these two, they're not just systems of government, they're fraternal brotherhoods. So these fraternal brotherhoods are, because it's exclusively a group of men, there may be women in it now, but when I was looking it up, you could go online and you could see the descendants of people who are in Illuminati, who are in the Masons. And it's like, well, everybody you know who's the high CEO and all that, but they're all men. So this group of brothers, this brotherhood, and it's like the Moose Lodge, you see down the street, that it's these men who walk in and they have their card or whatever, but they get together and they form a exclusive and dark society that no one's supposed to know about. So you're not supposed to know who's in it, but ironically we know because of the internet, thank God. And they get together for the purpose of deciding how things are going to go in the world, what people are going to do in their businesses, what decisions to make, so they can collaborate and get the most money and have mutual benefits amongst themselves, right? So that part of it is interesting. A lot of people are like, well, yeah, it's just some like brotherhood thing. The Freemasons, you see the sign on the street, it's no big deal. They get together, they're charitable, they do good things for people. Like, they help your grandma get groceries. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the face and that's the facade, that they put on. But behind that is all of these, if you get into all the conspiracy stuff of they're in everything and they're on everywhere, and you see their symbols and their logos, and then you can get into the astrology stuff, you can get into the Egyptian stuff if you want to. But what took my interest in it even further was the religious connection, because now it's not just a fraternal brotherhood that's sort of for all mankind, which is what they're talking about on the surface. They're also talking about being a religious order that worships. And that worship is, depending on what you read. So the Masons, depending on what you read, they say like, yes, we believe in God. So now they're at least a theist religion. So, okay, so they're theists who do good things, but they're also in control of everything. Something is kind of weird about that they don't, if they believe in God, why don't they just like worship with Christians and worship with other people or whatever? But you go in and they have certain rights. In order to join the group, you have to go through certain steps. And these steps involve things like silence, obedience to the group, and partaking in what for centuries would be called as paganistic acts. So things to do with sacrifices of blood, things to do with even hurting yourself. And you have all these different symbols that you start looking into, like what is the rights of the Illuminati. And if you want to go back, and then you have to make connections at some point to like Egypt and to pagan religion, because they get into animal sacrifices, they get into wearing headdresses, wearing robes, and having outfits. So now they definitely look like a religious sect. So now a religious sect. So religious sect worshiping, and who are they worshiping? So if they're worshiping God, that's one thing. But if these people have all of the power in the world, because that's the claim, they have all the power in the world, all the authority in the world, then where does that power come from? If it comes from God, then we can trust that it's good, and that they're going to be a force for good, and that they're going to be doing all these good things. But if it's for God, why are they hiding all the time? What is their secrecy about? What is they trying to hide? Why can't everybody join? What kind of exclusive nightclub is this? So that made me go into, well, maybe they're demon worshiping. And that's exactly what it was a fraternal brotherhood of men who get together and they worship Satan through specific pagan acts of worship, and then connecting it back to the Roman Church. You could, I didn't see connections then, but maybe you could see some connections now, because if you're Roman Catholic and if you don't know about things like the Black Mass or things like people breaking into Roman Catholic churches and desecrating the Eucharist, and having a even some places, there was some church in France, I think we talked about this once, that they found a catacomb sort of thing underneath a church, and it was a place of demonic or satanic worship. I mean, that's the word, is satanic or Satanist, right? And these Satanists, they go after specifically the Roman Church because they're so prolific. I mean, there's like 4 million, it's like the biggest church in the world. So why not go after them? And then also connection with saying that you have the body and blood of Christ is like saying that you have the person who claimed to be God and you're eating him on a weekly basis, is the perfect place to attack and the perfect thing to attack, because it goes right at the heart of the religion, right at the heart of Christianity. And if you're going to be attacking that, so let's say that the Illuminati are a group of Satanists, and you'd have to look into the research on your own. But if they go after the Roman Catholic Church, which believes in the body and blood of Christ is God, and you consume God, and then you could get into the whole deification thing in theology, then become like God. Then you have people who are godly and who are for God, and then you have people who are coming in and they're desecrating what is godly for these people, and that's pitting the devil against God. And now you have a war, and now you have a battle. So now you have the good side and the bad side, and now you have people who are for God and people who are against God, the godly and the ungodly.
Let's pause there for a second. So with all that in mind, first of all, how can you prove or disprove a secret group? And that's, to me, that's been the biggest issue. It's like people that say, there's a group of Jews, or all Jews are controlling things. Like, I'm as much part of the Jewish community as anybody else, and I still haven't found the group. I guess, you have to go through the rungs to get there. And it could be the same with the Catholic Church. Some people say the Catholic Church is the Illuminati, and you went through the ranks and you never found anything. What was behind the curtain? Now that you're Orthodox Antiochian, they have an actual curtain where they do the Eucharist and everything. And I'm sure that our friend Sam, who's a chanter for them, he has seen what's behind there, and there's no hocus pocus going on. So it's like, it's very easy to create a straw man and then build a whole thing about it. And that's what's happening right now. So the reason that we're talking about the Illuminati and the Masons and all this stuff is because I came to information about how there's this idea that coronavirus was created on purpose, and it was created by the Chinese to try to get into the Illuminati, or this amorphous group of world leaders who want to take over. And what's so stupid about it is that they've already taken over. Like, I think conspiracy theories, all they do is distract people from the realities that we're facing. So there's already rich people who run the world, and they don't care about everybody else but themselves. And they don't need to be a secret group, because they're out in the open telling people that they don't really care. There was a thing with Joe Biden that came up on one of the shows that I listened to. There's a video where he says, as a 20-year-old politician, I went to major donors and tried to prostitute myself, and they told me, come back when you're 40 because we're not ready to support you. And now that he's in his 70s, we know that he has a relationship with all the big corporations, and that he's trying to get in there to represent them. So there's no need for a secret group when there's all these like real malevolent forces of it's not because they're rich, it's not because they're powerful, it's because what they do with their power, what they do with their money. So now we're talking about a pandemic, And instead of taking a sober look at the pandemic and saying, what can we do to stop it? How can we provide healthcare for the people? Now we're going to come up with a crazy conspiracy theory that all that it does is create racism against people from China in their government. And then there's this distrust of the government that we're part of. Because in the before last show, talking about how great this country is, that you can uh, it's a experiment. So you get to try the liberal perspective, you get to try the conservative perspective, and you get to find a happy medium depending on the administration. Now they're saying that not only is Trump involved with this new world order, now you got Joe Biden who's involved too, and they're all trying to put people in extermination camps, and they're trying to pass martial law and all this stuff. For what purpose? If you already have all the power in the world like Trump does, because he's over the military and over, one of the largest countries in the world, now they're saying that they're going to make a pact with another large country in the world to have complete peace. So then what's the problem? And they're like, oh, well, if you make a one world government, then you don't have war anymore. And it's like, well, isn't that good? Like, so now being in constant war, in constant conflict, and pitting people against each other based on their race or where they come from, the language they speak, that's the way it should be. So they say, well, we're constitutionalists, we're not globalists. And that's the first anti-Semitic trope used against Jews. And do you remember that guy that was part of the Trump administration? The guy who's pretty much a Nazi, and he got kicked out?
Oh, Banner.
Yeah. So Banner used to have a fight with Kushner, and he would call him a globalist, and then Banner is a nationalist. And when someone's a nationalist, usually they're a white nationalist. So so now they're saying that those people are the true heroes because they're defending the country, and the globalists are the bad guys. But it always goes back to the same thing. The liberals are trying to make a one world order with there's no gender and there's no nationality and this and that. Then the conservatives are fighting for good moral Christian values, and then you find out that those guys are also in it. So it's like one time I worked with Vietnam veterans, and they were telling me that one of the reasons that they really struggled in Vietnam is because they would have people who were contributors or how do you call them? They were traitors to the Viet Cong, or they were whatever it's called. They were people who were working with them, and then in any moment they could turn on you. So they were like double agents. So that's why they started killing people indiscriminately, because they were scared. They didn't know who to trust. And that's pretty much what this guy was telling me. And that's what's dangerous for me, because then everybody who doesn't agree with you might be part of the conspiracy. And if I don't agree that there's going to be martial law, and I don't agree that we need to buy certain things to survive and stuff like that, then maybe I know and I'm going to benefit from this regime that is taking over. And it's just like, it's so paranoid and ridiculous that it takes away all the joy of being alive. Like, if all your life, if you watch the Doomsday Prepper show on Nat Geo, it's all about these people who are obsessed with something bad happening, and they never get to enjoy their lives. They never get to like breathe fresh air and go hang out in the park. They're like, oh no, we need to store for this bad thing is going to happen. It's like, you've never been through anything bad. People like me who are immigrants, you can't tell us about bad stuff. We've already been through all the bad stuff. So why would I be hoarding stuff when I can enjoy them? And the scans are going to go bad, and all that guns and crap is all going to stay here when you die. Why not live a fulfilling, thriving life instead of being so concerned about this coming apocalypse? And then it shows no faith in God, no faith in the system that we live in, no sense of responsibility. Like, the only responsibility is protecting your family. There's like, what about teaching them good values? What about sending them out to the world to help others? No, we're just gonna, so it's like this selfish obsession. And religious cults have that too, but now there's like a secular cult of prepping. And like, I know that this is not gonna go well with a lot of people on YouTube, but Like, Joe, help me out. You already told me how the Illuminati works. Now tell me how the good people fight the Illuminati.
Well, that's a great question. Probably one, by not being afraid of them. Two, debunking it as a conspiracy theory. And three, probably by maybe, this is kind of strange, maybe putting a little bit of faith in the goodwill of other people, that not everyone who's a politician is evil and out to get you. Not everyone who's a business owner and happens to be in a position of power and authority is there because they've joined a deep secret cult and they're worshiping Satan. Maybe they're just good at doing business. And you know, like, I like what you said, enjoying your life. Like, go play with your children, have a cup of tea, like read a good book, and chill out. Because what you're saying really struck me was that when you're in this sort of trying to figure everything out all the time and see all the connections between everything, and you create this whole web of theories, that really messes with your sense of peace. It really messes with your sense of stability, like your sense of self, and makes you lose sight of what's important in life, like, and also, like, I don't know, there's bigger problems in the world than the things that you cannot see. Like, the things that you can see are just as important. Like, okay, for me, like, taking care that I take care of myself, during this time of the coronavirus or whatever. I mean, that's what it is. But this whole, like, social distancing, staying away from people, policy that we're doing, that's it's important that I do that, not just for the sake of possibly helping a conspiratorial government get more power and take over the world, which, like you pointed out, they already have. So what's the point in fighting that? But in order to take care of myself, but for the sake of, hopefully other people, like doing simple things every day, simple acts of kindness and simple acts of generosity for people, I think will help me be a better person, and then also help the world at large, because the only world I have is the world that I'm in right now, the world that I'm living in, and it's people to people. It's, this person, one conversation, one act at a time, not trying to figure out how all these different connections, all these other people, what they're doing and what their business is, and how am I going to fix that problem anyways, right? So what would I, like, your question is right on point. What would you even do against them? You're going to go knock on the door of the Masons and say, hey, I know what you guys are up to, I'm calling the cops. Well, the cops are probably in on it if you believe the conspiracy theory. So good luck with that. Like, you're better off staying at home, just minding your own business, taking care of yourself, fixing some things you can in your house. Like, Joe, when's the last time you got your oil changed? Joe, are your clothes clean? Like, Joe, clean your room. Like, stuff like that, it's probably going to get you a lot further than worrying about what Bill, or what was his name, George Bush, is doing with his buddies on the, when he's not playing golf. Like, there's just
The real
no.
question is your bunker ready?
Right. Are you ready for the apocalypse? Now, that's an interesting story, because the whole bunker concept is not abstracted so much from reality and history, because there was kids in school during the Manhattan Project and that time after them, when they were actually doing nuclear testing, that had to go underneath their desks and put their hands up. And I remember, maybe it wasn't it would have been my aunts and uncles of their generation, right? The baby boomers. So them actually putting in, press, them seeing out there as kids, like in the newspapers and stuff, you need to be getting ready for nuclear war, because that was an actual possible real threat, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis was an actual real political event that could have been, the end of this generation, like could have killed, millions and millions of people. So I think the bunkering thing is a little bit more related to history and our actual experience than an Illuminati shadow government. Not to say that things like black masses aren't real, or things like people breaking into churches to desecrate them isn't real, because that still happens in Christian churches of many different denominations across the world, and religions against other religions. I mean, that's a fact. So, but the thing that I would warrant against, I guess, in myself especially, so going back to the bunker thing, because I didn't grow up in that generation, I can't relate to that concept and what it actually engenders. But I appreciate it as a concept, as an experience. But and that it's a real thing for some people. Like, I know some people in my church that they're elderly, and one of them just came out of chemotherapy for months and months and has recovered nearly fully. So that's, thank God. Then now this Corona thing comes up, and it's like, well, what are we going to do? The government's telling us to basically bunker. So that's what we're going to do. And he was an ex-Air Force military, so he knows a little bit about what it's like to be there and what the word bunker means. And so that's what they're doing. They got their supplies. They're going to be in their house for, they said, like 4 to 8 weeks at least, maybe 3 months. And there's another elderly couple that's doing it too. And so that's what they're doing, because that's the safe, smart thing to do for them. And they get that. But for me, it's a little different, because I didn't have the experience, and the idea of going to Myers and buying 12 dozen teepee is kind of silly, because my roommates are generous, and there's a couple of things in there that have been sitting in there for a while, and I'm going to be okay for weeks. But the bunkering down in my own experience is just hunkering down, doing the work that I need to do to stay sane, stay healthy, and stay safe in this. And the people that are actually in the at-risk population, it makes sense that they should isolate themselves, get away from people that could potentially harm them, until, to me, the problem isn't the actual virus. To me, the problem is the fear of a public widespread epidemic that is preventable in a nation, in a country that has a pretty darn good healthcare system. But there's cracks in it that we're kind of seeing now, I think, that are interesting. But I'm going off on a big tangent. That's to say that the people who need it are doing the right things, I think, by hunkering down, bunkering down, getting all the supplies they need, so that they can out past the storm here, and take care of themselves and can keep safe. Those of us who are healthier and going to be fine, I think it's still wise to follow the direction of the government and be in civil authorities for the sake of social peace. And so that there's and from the, I guess, religious perspective too, my church asks that we follow the government's directions and ordinances. So in all the Antiochian Orthodox churches, we have limited the services, the public services, to just the clerics and those who are involved in the actual service, in order for it to be necessarily happen. So it's closed off to the public. It's limited to 10 people, just like the government said. And that's a sad fact, but that's a fact, and that's one that the church is used to having, and that's what they're going to do, is be obedient until things change, and then we'll shift with that. But still continue to pray, still continue to have services, and then offer all the resources possible for having home church stuff with families. And then for those who want to pray, those services, you can follow along. There's alternatives to that. There's alternatives that you can pray at home for the church service, the liturgy, and there's lots of others. No alternative to being there and actually receiving communion, being part of the body. But short of that, there's lots of other things that you can do to still be in communion with everybody else, and you can still have your prayer in your life, and you just got to do it from home for now. So
I refuse to believe what you're saying. All this thinking clearly and acting rationally is unacceptable. I want to do the opposite. If the government does it, so it all starts from, I'm being cynical or sarcastic. It all starts with a premise. So if your premise is the government is evil, then of course you're not going to follow their guidelines. It's like they were showing people in Miami partying in the beach, and they were more doing it for YOLO, you only live once kind of thing. They're like, if I'm going to die, at least I'm going to die partying. But there's other people who are maybe this whole thing is a scam. Maybe they're just trying to control us. So I'm going to do the opposite of what the government says. And then, so then you don't live a peaceful life. You don't support people in your community. You don't stock up and try to be cautious. You do the opposite. You start stocking up weird stuff to defend yourself versus stuff to eat. And then again, it's you can only eat canned beans for so long. People are gonna. My friend was telling me that he learned how to skin a squirrel. So poor squirrels are paying for his paranoia. And I guess if you can make a coon gumbo or whatever to keep you going, that's fantastic. But we all watch Dual Survivor and things like that, and think, oh, it's cool that they can start a fire with a bunch of sticks or whatever. All that stuff draws your attention because we come from that background. When we were cavemen or early men, we had to survive what we had. So in a positive sense, it's good that people are being resourceful. On the negative sense is when it starts becoming a war against the world, because like you said, the good nature of humanity, I don't want to overdo that. We were talking about that in one of the previous shows about if you assume that men are angels, you're going to be in trouble. That they said that I think one of the founding fathers said that's why they created the Constitution and laws, because you want to think that people are angels, but they're not. So you have to have some type of system. And then the biggest fear is that there's going to be martial law. And again, martial law happens when there's chaos. If you instill martial law when people are behaving, then all that you're doing is bothering people. And then do you have the manpower to do it? So that's really the challenge of these conspiracy theories, is that they don't make any sense. There's a documentary about the flat Earth on Netflix, and there's different camps, and there's people that fight over it. And one of the guys who's one of the people that first came up with the theory, he's paranoid, and he thinks that everybody doesn't agree with his version of the theory. It's FBI or CIA or spy or something like that. And that's how he gets off the heat. If you disagree with him and you actually have a good reason to disagree, he just ignores you and insults you and dismisses you. So in the same way, right now, when we're all being cautious and taking this situation very seriously, there's always going to be somebody who say, whatever, but there's always someone who's going to go overboard. So I think it's important for mediums of communication just as this one, for us to give people some good information. And what I'm trying to do right now is debunk this idea of a vast conspiracy, because again, what is the ultimate point? If they're demonic, then they have a lot of power that we cannot fight. If you follow Christian interpretation of the Bible, your boy Paul said, we're fighting against not against flesh and blood, we're fighting against the spiritual realm. So if that's the case, then we don't have the tools to fight back other than prayer, spiritual conviction, and extreme submission to God's will. And if it's something physical, then we have to behave like in any other situation. Like if you're under threat or something, you either flee, freeze, or participate or whatever. Like there's different ways that you can handle situations. So I think that this is bringing out the best in people and the worst in people. If you're already unstable and you have a lot of insecurities and concerns in your system, a situation like this is going to stir up a lot of negative feelings and a lot of lashing out at people. But if you're someone who's been working on having a balanced perspective or a well-defined boundaries and a lifestyle that is healthy, then you're going to try to find healthy ways to handle this. So I know that you've dealt with anxiety in the past. Have you seen yourself being like extremely worried or concerned about what's happening, or have you been able to just I guess you were saying that the system that you're part of, your church, has given you kind of like a path. Do you ever fall into the trap of getting overly worried and getting immobilized and not able to find a way to deal with this in the best way possible?
Yeah, I'd say I do. It's hard to read all the posts and read the news and watch what people are saying, and you not get a bit afraid, not get worried and feel anxious for myself, for my family, So I definitely have given into that and felt that it's a very difficult situation, and it does cause a lot of anxiety.
But there are different ways to deal with anxiety. If it gives you peace to have an arsenal and have a bunker or a big pantry full of canned food, stuff like that, I guess that's your therapy. That's your way of coping. But the fear is when it becomes destructive. There was a family in the show Doomsday Preppers that the children were being, they were moving from one place to another. They were losing their friendships. They were being put around other preppers who were kind of weird and problematic. So it was affecting the life of that family because the dad was so paranoid. And instead of getting therapy or finding a good church or a good community of support of people, he went and joined a prepper club where all they do is shoot guns every day and try to find ways to learn to defend themselves. And again, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but the issue is when it becomes an obsession. The way you know that you're addicted to something is that's the only thing you think about. Your whole life revolves around it, and you make decisions that impact your life for the sake of this addiction. So that show, instead of providing alternatives for people who are following that path that could be very destructive, they like glamorize it as like, oh, someone who's buying a huge piece of land and making a hole in the ground and building a thing, like that they're cool for doing that. And maybe they are, and maybe they can have tours of whatever they did, or maybe they're very ingenious and inventive. But again, humans have to interact with others. Humans have to have access to resources. If your children do not have the ability to deal with stress in a positive, healthy way, then they're going to become also paranoid, and they're going to start coming up with theories. And look at David Koresh and people like that. Like, they had a paranoia against the government, and they felt that the end of the world was coming and stuff like that. So I think that my theory of being a doomsday cult without the religious component is actually true, because it has all the same signs. It has the isolation, the lack of trust, the feeling as a martyr, or feeling that you have a special purpose that is divinely inspired, or that you're the only one who knows that this is coming. Like, I know that the ones that thought that there was going to be some virus that was going to kill everybody are all excited because they're like, I was right. This all along, people thought I was crazy, and now I came up with this theory, and it's somewhat the same. So, but a lot of us who don't have those theories are very taken aback by the situation, and it's taxing on all of us, on our children, on our elderly family members. Uh, now they're saying that they might be shutting down a lot of cities. San Francisco's trying to self-quarantine everybody. So it's going to be a long haul to get all this stuff straight, but we have to stay calm. We have to find the same sources of strength and solace, like where we can like be at peace and find comfort and cry out to whatever gives us meaning and purpose in the midst of a challenging situation. And what I've seen is that it's given us an opportunity to pause and to connect with neighbors, to spend more time with our families, and that's what it should be. But this is just the beginning. If it takes a couple of months, it's going to create a lot of resentment and conflict, because people are going to be stuck in the same place without having alternatives. Even wanting to go to the movies or to a concert or something like that now is becoming limited, and that's a lot to put on people to not have access to things that give you joy. So we're lucky to have technology that we can stream a lot of stuff, but after a while that gets old. And I wonder how gamers and people like that, who their whole life revolves around being in front of a computer, how are they dealing with this? They're like, work from home, and I'm like, I've been working from home all along. So maybe they're thriving and like they're happy that finally other people are experiencing the same type of lifestyle they do. But you don't want to be like those people in that movie Wall-E, where all they do is sit on a sofa and look at a pad all day, and the food and everything is prepared for them. And now they're saying, well, don't go to the grocery store, have them delivered. Like, I don't enjoy going to the grocery store, but I find it as the store is now the new marketplace. So you actually like interact with people, you pick your own food, you have some type of livelihood. It's like back in the small towns where they had the plaza where you would go buy stuff. I went to farmers market today, and it was lovely. Like, the people there were very sweet, and I got to talk to some people I knew. And like, I hope that those aspects of community come around. But if they're saying you can't be in a place where there's more than 10 people, there was 30, 40 people there. So that means that, like, should we have smaller versions of that? I don't really know how we're gonna find solutions for the situation.
That's it's tricky. See, nobody knows, right? I don't know. Nobody knows. I look to the older people and I go, you guys know more than I do. So what happened, on the last outbreaks or whatever, what happened before it? The only thing I remember was like SARS and mad cow disease, but that was like, forever long ago. And sitting in the bar last week by myself, staring up at the news for a few seconds, I caught the glance on the screen of the deaths by flu. And it was something like 5,700 and 5,800, 5,600, something like that a year. And now this is just only my opinion, so take it for the penny that it's worth. And I'll probably shoot myself later for it. But there's more deaths by flu per year than there are than coronavirus. And the problem that I keep hearing is the rate, right? And it's all about the curve and all about flattening the curve. And so it becomes a statistical game, which is kind of an interesting thing to look at. But anyways, we're going to be talking about this for months, and we're going to be talking about this for years afterwards, trying to figure out what happened. And hindsight's 2020. So it's kind of going through the fog together, I think, right now.
So we're gonna play a game. How many conspiracy theories have you heard about the coronavirus? I think they're all fake and made up by people. So I heard that it was people eating bats in China, that the bat has the virus and it passed it on to us. They were either eating it like raw, or they were eating it as soup. And then the other idea is that it was created in a lab as a biological weapon by the Chinese Communist government. What conspiracy theories have you heard about the coronavirus so far?
I haven't heard any, actually. Those are the first three.
Well, you watch Fox News, don't you?
No, I don't watch Fox News.
Oh, um, I haven't been watching my favorite show, InfoWars. Uh, that guy claims he sells a toothpaste that kills the coronavirus. So, and then the current president is calling it the Chinese disease, and that is again he does a lot of race baiting. So now he's like blaming it specifically on them. And in Fox News, they even asked for an apology from the Chinese to the world for the virus. And it's like, then the U.S. has to apologize for Jersey Shore, because now there's a Polish Jersey Shore, or there's a French one, there's an African one. So we spread crap all over the world too, and we never apologize.
That's so true.
There's a Mexican Big Brother.
Oh, really?
So it's like the Office is the only thing that it was imported from England. Now there's an Israeli Office and there's a Korean Office. So, but not to make light of this illness, we cannot pinpoint it to the people who were unlucky enough to be there when it developed. When swine flu came about, it was from Mexico, and I went to Greece with my wife, and I told the bus driver that I was from Mexico, and he's like, "Stay away from me." And I'm like, "I haven't been in Mexico in 25 years," but it came from a pig farm, and I don't even know how it happened. And then the bird flu was also in China, and they were saying that there was a lot of birds, or I don't know if it was dogs or something over there. So you can connect it to something, but that doesn't give you the right to start being racist or disparaging a group of people because of where it came from. We're all humans. We're all susceptible to diseases, and there are some diseases that we really don't know where they come from. So in the Bible, it says that you would get all the plagues of Egypt if you misbehave. So in the religious groups that I'm part of, we've been talking about how this is a very interesting type of plague, because it affects children, but they don't get symptoms. It's only adults that get the symptoms, and then it's the elderly that they could kill, or the people with respiratory problems. My friend was saying that that's not true. There's actually people in their 20s and their 40s that are being killed by disease, but the numbers are so low. It's 3 to 4% of the whole number of people who are sick. So if it ends up being a lot of people, if we have 7 billion people and 3% of 7 billion dies, that's horrible. And I think that's what we're trying to stop. But it's still a small percentage compared to, I don't know what other illness or situation could be. People were minimizing it at first, like more people die from car accidents, more people die from cancer, something like that. It's like, yeah, but you can't just catch cancer like that easily. And so that's the thing. It's like it's indiscriminate in the sense that we could all have it. And if a healthy adult gets it, you're only going to be sick for the time that you have it. The issue is that you can get something else, and that can deplete your immune system, and that could finally be your demise. So that's why we're all being cautious. But there has to be a balance of being healthy and reasonably concerned, and then at the same time being able to still live our lives and participate in society. Because if everybody goes online somebody was saying that even the internet can get overwhelmed with everybody working from home. So now the technology that we're using to stay sane and to participate in the world while being self-quarantined is not going to give us the help that we need. So we need to come up with creative ways for us to stay sane in our homes and take care of each other. So I hope that all these false conspiracies and crazy ideas all go away, and we can focus on how do we support each other, because we're all in it together. So even people who are wealthy or powerful are susceptible to this. So it's kind of like that Bible passage says that the rain comes on the wicked and the righteous. So or the sun comes out on the wicked and the righteous. So we're all part of this. It's like we talk about Noah's Ark, like in a previous show. We're all in this ark that is the world, and we have to take care of it, and we have to respect the force of nature. So a lot of times, people meddling with the force of nature that bring about these type of deadly diseases.
Yeah, that's a good point. Playing around with nuclear fission created a big problem. Or nuclear fusion when they combine. And then the health risk posed by this is pretty enormous. If you look at the stats, I mean, the numbers only go up into the thousands. So if you want to play with the numbers, you can. That there's 350 million plus people in the United States alone, and that the number of cases is so low. Italy's cases are obviously much greater, but they've had it for longer, and then they also didn't do all the self-quarantining that we're doing. But I saw something very interesting today, that a group of young guys, they came across the respirator system that the hospitals were using as a cure. I want it, not a cure, but
Okay.
yeah. Did you say that? So they took it. They somehow got the designs for it, not from the company who made it, and they used the 3D printer, and they 3D printed. Can't remember how many. It was something like a few hundred. May have been more than that. But they started a business, and they got it funded, and they printed these, and they gave them to people, and they gave them to like 100 people in the hospital, or 250 people in a hospital, and actually, help them recover. So like the contention there was that they broke trade law, or their whatever copyright is in Italy, and the company is going after them, but the story isn't complete there. But that, to me, that's a sign of hope, that people are getting creative about how to find a solution, because if the government hasn't figured one out yet, then, we got to kind of get going on this, because there's a few different factors that are kind of playing into the line, that the self-quarantining as a result, or as a method to halt or slow down the effects of the spread is effective, has been, according to what I've seen in a little bit that I've read, apparently an effective method for at least slowing it down. And if you're going to do that, though, the effects, like you're saying, on people is greater. And that's kind of what worries me more, or interests me more, as far as how this is going to play out, is that what is going to be the social effect on being self-quarantined for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. The business economics question is also critical to look at, but the effect on people and relationships and communities, and how we relate to one another, like you said, talking on Zoom like we are right now, it's a cool tool, and it's this is really nice. It's great to see you. I don't think I've spent this much time with you ever. Besides maybe that time we had tacos in Tennessee, and then went out to the that religious community and had apple cider. And I'd kill for an experience like that right now, but you can't, And so how long can we put off, exactly like you're saying, how long can we put off that until it becomes a bigger problem? Because it's hard to be away from people this long. And then the mediation of technology is fantastic and it's a great tool. And I'm super excited and thrilled that I live in a generation and time that is able to do this so quickly and intuitively, because we're used to growing up with the internet and these tools. But it's also going to be an experiment, because since the internet has come out, we haven't done anything like this where we've quarantined ourselves off to the point where we have to only use the internet and this is our means of communication. Like, there's a great book that Sam would talk about, and there's a one-liner from it that he always mentioned, which was the mode. The mode is the meaning, I want to say. That's not exactly it. How'd it go? The message is the meaning, something like that. But it was talking about how the mode of communication is just as important as what's inside the communication itself. So talking via Skype and seeing each other is fantastic. A phone call, that works too. Seeing each other is much better than a phone call, obviously. But we're going to have to use these alternatives to get by. But it's an experiment to the point where we don't know how it's going to affect people psychologically, sociologically. Like I said, some people are running off to the beaches to just go do whatever. I remember seeing a post about MSU was canceled. So every student went to the bar afterwards, and it's like, well, now the bars are doing great and it's packed, but then they closed them down a few days later. But so some people, yeah, like that's what I wanted to do, to be honest. I was like, screw this. I just wanted to go to the bar and have a drink. But now the bars can't do that. You can't have these social places. You can't go out to eat at a restaurant, sit down, with your significant other or your family and have a meal. Everything's at home, which is great, which I think is a lot to be said for like homeschooling and teaching the family how to be a family again at home. But my sister does homeschooling, so she made a post on Facebook about how, welcome. That's what it was. It was from the song "Welcome to the Jungle." She was like, all these people are now talking about homeschooling. It's like, welcome to the jungle. Like, you can join it anytime you want. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how technology plays a role in how we communicate and how we stay connected, because we're going to have to use it now more than ever. And I didn't know that the internet was in question, because the internet's, as far as I understand how it works, is based on remote servers that exist in other places, and those the information gets transmitted via hardwire. But the beginning of the internet was a server, one in the United States and one in Great Britain, and they were able, in Boston and I think Philly, that they were able to communicate to each other without being, connected. So they found a remote connection. I think there's so many things that could be said about how we have to go back, how we're thinking about going back to the land, how we're thinking about prepping, how we're thinking about the end of the world, how we're thinking about Armageddon, how we're thinking about how we deal with that, how we think about bunkering down. But the internet was a means and a way for getting the world sort of out of itself and into the rest of the world. There's a lot of bad stuff that can be said about it. That's for sure. But as far as like what gets communicated, how it gets communicated, how it's influenced culture and society, the influence of the increased amount of screen time that you get for kids, how it affects their health, violence, pornography. these things are not good, but that's the fundamental premise of the internet, is that you can share anything that you want, that you can sort of transmit on bits. And we just have to be diligent, careful, mindful about how we use it, and cautious about what we use it for, and then cautious maybe about the amount of time that we're spending on it too. Like, the communication is good, Facebook's great, this stuff is good for staying in touch, but maybe being a gamer and sitting in front of your computer screen or your TV screen for 8 hours a day is not a healthy thing to do, and maybe it's not a healthy thing to do as an adult either. We'll have to see, because that's what a lot of people are doing now. Is kids are doing it already because they're used to it. They're on, the Game Boys. Kids at 3 years old, they have phones, cell phones, and now adults are on Facebook, and now everybody's checking their news feed constantly. Everyone's sitting in front of a screen constantly, and we don't know what the health risks are. Some people, like a guy I worked with the other day, was saying he doesn't think that there's any kind of health risk from being in front of a screen all day. The idea there is that because it's blue light, it affects the wavelengths in your eyes differently, and so it can create some kind of degeneration. But he was saying that he doesn't think there's any kind of problem with that. So I haven't read the literature on that, but it's interesting to see what is going to be the outset, because we are going to be experiencing a dark time, and it's going to be a get through it by whatever means possible, and it's going to be dark though. And if that means just being a little more diligent and safe and cautious and more connected and talking to people more and through other means, then God willing.
We want to thank you for your time. We've dealt with a lot of different issues. Get some rest, Joe, and maybe next time you can tell us about your job with the political statistics and polls and all that.